process of cyanotype uses a light-sensitive solution that darkens to a deep blue when exposed to sunlight. What most people don't realize is that A, you can make your own surface for cyanotype. B, you don't have to use sunlight. And C, you have endless options for experimentation and creativity. These one-of-a-kind monoprints start with a mixture of ferric ammonium citrate and potassium ferrocyanide. It comes in a kit, and it's very easy to mix up ahead of time or right as you're ready to use it. Have your paper cut and ready to print. You can use heavy paper, also fabric, canvas, wood. I'm using Bristol. Draw the curtains. Close the shades. The room doesn't need to be dark, but it does need to be dim. Mix equal amounts from bottles A and B. For best results, use a glass container. I like to mix small amounts at a time so nothing goes to waste. Paint the solution on the paper. If you're ready, you can start preparing for exposure now while it's still wet, or set the papers in a large box to dry. If you need to prepare them a day or so ahead of time, you'll need to take some special precautions to protect them not just against the light exposure, but also against oxygen, which causes it to oxidize. Place the dried papers in a zip bag and then place them in an envelope made from a couple layers of heavy cardstock and opaque tape. Set this inside of a drawer. You can also place them in an archival storage box, which is used to protect documents and photos against UV light. Now comes the fun part. Let's run through some wet cyanotype techniques. Remember, no two prints will ever be the same. I'm going to start by spritzing a little water to make a splatter texture across the page. I added a little bit of apple cider vinegar. You could also add coffee or tea to add a little stain to the paper. You can add sprinkles, baking sprinkles, confetti, rice, salt, so many things to experiment with. You can also bunch plastic wrap to make interesting patterns. I'm adding some packing shreds to add a little bit of interesting texture. Here's a fun technique. Blow some bubbles with a little dish soap and allow it to fall randomly on the paper. If you have an interesting background, include an opaque subject. We often see botanicals used in cyanotype, but you could use paper cutouts, lace, jewelry. I have some old pieces of antique jewelry to put here. You may want to place a piece of clear acrylic or glass over the print to hold everything in place. It's not as necessary if you're inside. If you expose the print in the sunlight, the time needed will vary. I would recommend an hour at the minimum. It's easier to expose indoors in a controlled environment. This is a Speedball UV LED exposure lamp used for screen printing. Now I've created an exposure station inside of a large box. There's a hole cut in the top, the size of the lamp. We'll put that over the top and then slide our tray inside. You could use a larger box and expose multiple prints at the same time. It only takes about 30 minutes, but that can vary according to the amount of wet material and the thickness of the items. It's okay to overexpose it. The chemistry will dry and darken to a deep Prussian blue. Place the prints in a tray of cool water for at least 5 minutes. White areas of the print should be bright white with no yellowish tinge. Hang or lay flat to dry. The blue color will continue to deepen as the prints dry. We covered a lot of techniques in one print. Try these out, and when you're ready, move on to the next level. Level 2, you can add some color. While the print is still wet, sprinkle some brush oak crystals or drops of watercolor to add a bit of color without interfering with the print. Level 3, make a creative printing plate on Duralar, a clear, rigid plastic film. Create a collagraph by gluing fabrics, fibers, and papers onto the piece of Duralar and allow it to dry. Here's a variety of yarn and string, and here's the print it made. Or paint an image onto the plate using opaque black acrylic. You can use some tools to make it a subtractive print as well. Here's the plate and here's the print. These ideas can be used in combination with the wet techniques, and you can make multiple prints. I hope this fires up your imagination and inspires you to experiment with wet cyanotype. It's easy to get started with wet cyanotype. It's just hard to stop. Purchase the Jacquard Cyanotype Sensitizer Set and all the materials shown here today at Blick Art Materials. Follow the link to find a full materials list, step-by-step instructions, and more wet cyanotype ideas.